as much as the amount of pleasure that they would get out of using the $50, say, to pay for a hotel for the night, or for themselves to have a nice dinner, or maybe they'll have 5 or 6 dinners from it because they'll eat, at a cheaper place. So instead of taking my family out, I did the right thing and I gave it to the homeless people. I think that's an accurate, a conclusion you could draw from Mill's philosophy. And these students are saying, I don't think that's realistic. So we could talk about this for a long time, but Mill would say, I think, so what? Ethics isn't easy. Being a good person might be hard at times. But just because it's difficult, just because it challenges our selfish, self-centered human nature, doesn't mean it's wrong. In this ways, I think he's a lot like Kant. They have very, very different ideas about how to think about morality, but you could have the same objection to Kant, right? Like, it's very, very difficult to stop and ask yourself, should I do this or not? And am I acting in such a way that would be a good law for everyone? You're holding yourself to a very, very high standard of action, right? You're not allowing yourself to really get away with anything on Kant's view. You have to do the right thing, and the right thing is sometimes very, very difficult. And Kant would say, sorry, that's the way it is. Like, if you want to do the right thing, this is what it means. So work on it, right? Become better. And I think Mill would say the same thing, even though he's advocating a different way of looking at morality. The goal would be to train yourself over time and to train your kids and for all of us to become more sensitive and open and understanding to the needs of people around us. And when they have real needs that are much more difficult, much more serious than our needs, we should help them. That's what he's saying. Everyone would love to just have happiness without experiencing pain in their lives, but it's not possible. That's a mischaracterization of what Mill is saying. Mill is not saying we can create a world where no one experiences pain. A perfect, somehow pain-free world. Not at all. So he's saying the world is full of all kinds of suffering right now, all kinds of pain. I don't think anyone can deny that. So he's not talking about a world without pain. He's just saying all of us should work to reduce the pain that there is, with no expectation that we could ever get rid of all the pain in the world. So that's really just a mischaracterization of what he's saying. Okay, another comment. His theories make sense but are unrealistic. The end justifies the means. If 100 people wanted you dead and 85 didn't, according to Mill, happiness for the greater good is the right action. The 100 people would be happy to see you die, so the right action would be to kill you. I see you've been reading my Facebook posts. With that example being given, the outcome of an action has to benefit the larger population in order to be considered the right action. Is that correct? Okay, so both of these are talking about this idea that for Mill, when you say your action should produce the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people, what happens when you have the majority of a population or majority of a group that would be happy with, let's say, the death penalty, right? So if the majority of the society says, we will really feel satisfied if criminals are put to death, according to Mill, apparently that just makes it right. So this is what the student means by the end, the goal, the purpose of making people happy justifies the means. How are we going to make them happy? Well, they want to see executions, so let's give them executions. Maybe you could think of like the gladiators, right? Yeah, a few people had to die, but it entertained thousands and thousands of people, so it was worth it. Is this an accurate way, to describe Mill's thinking? And I think it is to some extent. What I would caution is this. It's very easy to create scenarios like this. If 100 people want me to die, 85 don't. It's easy to create scenarios like that hypothetically. But what Mill would say, I think in almost all of these situations, is you're creating a false alternative. You're acting as though there are only two choices. And he would say, with the gladiators, for example, that it's not a choice between gladiators or no gladiators, where you say, we can't make the people happy without gladiators. What your obligation is to find other ways of entertaining people that have less suffering. Right? So if you live in a society where the only way people can be happy and entertained is by watching, lions tear apart gladiators, then maybe you have an either-or choice. But if you live in a human society and you can entertain people in lots of other ways that don't involve blood and murder and suffering, then you have a better choice. And you don't have to do what, quote, the majority says about the gladiators. So see the logic there? Let me just make sure you understand this. It sounds like an either-or choice, and it's a good question because it challenges Mill's logic. But if there's a third or fourth or fifth alternative where you can achieve that end, making people happy, entertaining them, right? If you can achieve that end and do it without causing the human suffering, then that's an even better choice. And that's what you should do. So the general rule would be something like, if you're faced with what appears to be a difficult dilemma that says in order to do a good thing you have to do a bad thing, search as much as you can for a way of achieving the good thing without doing the bad thing. All right. I don't know if I could base my decisions on how it affects other people or sacrifice my own happiness in order to make everyone else happy. Someone says, why do you need to do what's best for everyone's happiness when doing something supposedly bad could make you feel good? So I think this is a bit related to the unrealistic question. So just to clarify, there will be a lot of situations where Mill would say the right thing to do is to give people money or take your time to help them or volunteer or do things that you might not typically choose for yourself, right? You want to go home and play video games, he's going to say, but if you know that there are people in your neighborhood who are struggling, with really difficult things, you should probably go try to help them. Is that sacrificing? Yeah, to some extent you might say you're sacrificing your own happiness. But utilitarianism is not Christianity. It is not Jesus's ethos of love and forgiveness and turn the other cheek. You don't have to abandon your own happiness. You don't have to treat yourself as kind of worth less in order to do what's right to others. You get to ask, what do I need? What is, what will make me happy? What's good for me? And that's included in the calculus that you do. And it sort of protects you then from feeling like you always have to give up, you always have to sacrifice. But that being said, for most Americans, we are, the most fortunate people on earth to live in the most powerful, prosperous country. We take so many things for granted that literally billions of human beings don't have. So to that extent, Mill might say we need to do a lot more self-sacrifice to be ethical people. Someone says, I don't quite agree the idea that in order to be completely happy personally, we have to include others in every decision. Okay, this is a confusion. Mill is not saying that it will necessarily make you happy to ask how your actions are going to affect other people. The goal is not your happiness. The goal is the happiness of the world. The goal is to benefit the world. And again, that can sound like some silly world where there's no suffering. No, he's just saying, look, let's begin by reducing the misery. So let's don't even talk about happiness. Let's just talk about reducing the misery that's out there. So it may not make you happy to go to a homeless shelter and feed people, but it's the right thing to do because you're helping reduce the misery of a lot of people. So if this person is confused because they think Mill is saying, my ethics is going to make you happy. He's not promising that. Now, he does think that because we are higher, more intellectual beings, we can recognize and get satisfaction out of doing good things for other people. But that doesn't mean all the time when we're doing that we're going to necessarily be happy. Let's see, a few more things. I'll let you go. I would ask Mill to explain, what if a person's actions are pure and good, but the results do not produce the maximal utility? That's a good question. That's sort of from Kant's perspective, where he's going to say the intentions are what really matter. We've seen examples where that seems to be the case. I don't think Mill has a perfect answer for this. I think he's just going to say, yeah, then you would say that turned out to be bad, and I'm going to try to be a little more careful next time. Kant, of course, wants to find that thing about morality that kind of guarantees that you can know that you did the right thing, even if the consequences backfire. Mill's not so concerned about that. He's not so concerned about knowing for sure that you're without blame and that you're doing a morally pure thing. He doesn't care so much about moral purity. He cares about getting out in the world, get your hands dirty, trying to help people. If it backfires, you say, "So I'm so sorry, I was trying to do the right thing," but you don't justify yourself. You try to get out there and do it better next time. Although we may not always think about it, happiness is the motive for the majority of things we do. That's Mill's point. If we aren't seeking happiness, we are by all means avoiding pain. Okay, so this is just someone agreeing with Mill. They think he sort of got it right, that seeking pleasure or happiness and avoiding suffering and pain is basically the description of human nature. That when we act, we don't deliberately try to create our own suffering. And we're complicated enough that some of us, no pain, no gain, right? You go to the gym, you're going to suffer, but you have a long-term goal for that, which you say is better, will help me be happy, be healthy. So it's not so simple as saying no suffering, but it's to say if you suffer, you're doing it, if you willingly suffer, you're doing it because you believe it will ultimately make you a happier person. Okay, I like this comment. It's our job to make others feel included, to help increase the happiness in their lives just as well. I think this theory would come into play in discussion groups, including everyone to give their input no matter what they have to say, just giving them a chance to talk and feel important as well. So I really like this because Mill sounds sort of like a cold, calculating, scientific person, but and he is to some extent, but this person has found a way in which you could think about Mill's philosophy in a very kind of personal, emotional sense. That human beings, you remember the thing about it's better be Socrates and poor than a pig satisfied. Human beings have intellectual and social and emotional depth and complexity to them that many other animals do not have. And happiness, the question of happiness is not just about physical needs. This person is pointing to the way in which just to be listened to, just to be paid attention to, just to be recognized by other people is a deeply important thing. And when you have people in your society who, think of a lot of teenagers who've been abandoned or abused, runaways and things like that, if they can get into a discussion group, just being heard, just being respected and listened to, and without anything, really being given to them, that still is a way of offering something of profound meaning to them that can help them be happier people, or again, less